Welcome friends, it is I, your old Sascraft, and it's time for another guide, and we're doing the solo guide this time. And just like the jungle guide, this is meant for beginners and intermediate players, really mostly for beginners, and help intermediates a little bit, while as advanced players should already know pretty much all the things we're going to say here. And we're going to go over a lot of sections here, and here are what the sections are. Solo lane purpose, soloist considerations, laning phase, rotation and team fighting phases, 2v1 situations, and final thoughts. Solo lane purpose. So the solo lane is generally the short lane, which is located on the left or right depending on whether you're on the blue or the orange side of the map. This is the side that has the fire giant on it. Now, you have three purposes as a soloist. The first purpose is to farm up well in your lane and try to get an edge against your opponent soloist. The second purpose is to create opportunities for your jungler to get ganks, that way they can get stronger themselves, which will help your team overall. And the third purpose is to kill or force out the enemy soloist, which will make you stronger in general in that lane and will keep them weak for the later phases such as rotation and team fighting phases. Soloist considerations. Now there are four things you should consider when picking your soloist. And the first one is sustainability. How long can you stay in your lane before you have to go back to base and heal up and then come back out? With good sustainability, you'll be able to farm well and get a lot of golden XP and hopefully more than your opponent. The second is clear ability, which is of course clearing the enemy waves. And if you can clear well, then you can choose your positioning in the match. You can choose to be very aggressive or very defensive, depending on how well you can clear. And this of course, if you can clear very well, allows you to keep your lane healthy and of course also gives you last hits so that you can get more gold ahead of your opponent. Third is escapability, and that is, of course, your ability to get out of ganks or any bad situation that could happen. And this, of course, just important to not get killed, because getting killed at any point is very disastrous, so you don't want that to happen. The fourth is killability, and that is the ability to kill the opponent. What you want to do is, of course, have them in a good position for you to get a kill, and just take them out so that they are behind you, and you just have a better position in the match. These are the four things you should consider. You don't have to have every single thing for a god, but you have to have just at least 2 or 3 of them to do well, I feel. Now, any god in the mid lane is capable of doing the solo lane because of their good clear and the sustainability. And you should use them as beginners to learn just how to do the solo lane. And eventually you can branch out into gods who are pretty good at solo, such as Hercules, Freya, Loki, Zhang Kuei, Bakasura, and Kali. Laning phase. So here we're going to talk about the first half of the match, which is your open and the tug of war between you and the other soloist as you're trying to take control of the solo lane. So first off is the open. Now in the open, you want to talk with your jungler. You want to know what their route is so that you can know if they're going to go to your blue soon or not. Now left lane is more concerned about this than right lane. If you are on the left lane, most likely you're going to open the mid Furies and then you have to go to your lane immediately because of how far away you are. Now you got to talk with the jungler to find out whether or not they're going to be at your blue soon or they're going to take their time somewhere else, because they're usually on the right side. And if they're going to take their time, then you need to get the blue yourself, because the blue is very important for your sustainability in fighting your lane. So you just need to find out and move on from there. Now if you're on the right side, you're in a better position. So what you do is you start at the mid right Furies, and you go with your jungler to the red and then the blue, and then you move on to your lane. Or the jungler may invade the blue so you can get that buff there and then move to your lane, which will give you a good start as well. Those are the different opens you can have, unless the jungler goes for open, which does not happen very often, but if it does, you have to change your plans accordingly. Now, the laning phase is more of a tug of war. You have to consider where you are depending on what god you are and what your plan is. Do you want to starve your opponent? Do you want to kill your opponent? Or are you going to hang out and keep them around so that your jungler can get the ganks? What is your plan exactly? And it all depends on what god you are. Now, if you have a strong clear and a good sustain, you might consider fighting from your tower. Now, this is turtling style. And the way this works is you fight from your tower and you kill the enemy minions before they reach your tower. And you and your opponent are both getting full XP and gold, but what this does is it keeps them close to your side and open for a gank from your jungler. And it keeps you out of their jungler's range. And it can work, but it needs specific gods for it. The only problem here is if your jungler does not come very often, it may just not be anything and just both you and the other soloist are just gaining equal golden XP and nothing's really happening. The other way is the more aggressive way, which is actually pushing them to their tower and making sure your minions actually get into their tower's range. Because when a minion is killed by the tower, the opposing soloist gets less XP and gold. If the tower hits the minion, they don't get any gold at all, and they get reduced XP. So if you want to play aggressive like that, that's great. The problem though is you want to make sure you have wards, because you can be ganked very easily from their closest intersection or from the middle intersection. Then there is the neutral position, and this is in the middle of the lane, and this one has all the possibilities possible for you and for them. You're both getting the same amount of golden XP depending on who's getting better last hits and who's just clearing better in general. But this gives you an opportunity to poke and try to set them up for a gank from your jungler, or for you to kill them yourself, and the same thing can be said for them. And it depends on your god how you want to do that. All in all, you gotta consider your god and what kind of style you should go with for these things, because they can all work out depending on who you are. Not all gods can do every different style, but some gods just have a strength in one style or the other, and you just gotta think about that and how you want to set up ganks for your jungler. There are some times where you're going to get ganked, you're going to get behind, and you're going to need your jungler to help you out and do some ganking to help you keep the lane healthy again. If your jungler fails to do so, you might be in trouble and you may have to be passive for quite a long time and find opportunities to farm up whenever possible for the later phases of the game. Your biggest goal is just be not really fed, but farmed well and healthy. You want to be able to help out when your team needs you later on in the match when you do rotations and team fighting, and you want to be able to keep the enemy soloist down as much as you can so that they're not being very helpful later on in the match. Everything you do in the solo lane is fighting for the second half of the match. Everything you do is to prep up and get ready, because the second phase of the match is where everything gets crazy. And the last thing you want to remember is you do not want to get killed no matter what. Do not put yourself at risk even if you have a chance of getting a kill. Trading is not very good. Being alive is more important than getting kills at this point, because you just want to have a good farm and you want to be strong for the second part of the match. Rotation and team fighting phases. Now the second phase of the match is the rotation phase. What's going on here is the solo god will move over to the mid lane, and optionally the mid god will either stay there or go over to the duo lane. What you're doing is you're trying to cause outnumbering situations where the solo going to mid can do an outnumber of 2-on-1 fight in the mid to get a gank or push the tower, or the solo takes over the mid lane for a while so that the mid god can go over and cause 3v2 or 4v2 situations in the duo lane to push that tower or get ganks. Eventually the mid god comes back to mid and the solo god goes back to solo, and that's just rotating. You're rotating back and forth, trying to create an edge for your team. Now, the best time to do rotation, of course, is either by killing your enemy soloist or by pushing them back to base. With that going on, you can go ahead and rotate for about 1 or 2 waves before you have to go back. Now, the reasons why you would not rotate is if you're too far behind in level so that you need to just keep farming, you can't risk ganks, or you are being pushed currently and you just can't go over because, well, your lane's getting pushed. You can't rotate because you're getting pushed. And when those are happening, you need to make sure you know the VF command and the VT command. VF for MIAs and VT to let your team know when the enemy god is back in your lane. That way they know when they should be worried if a soloist is loose or not. Now the last phase of the match is the team fighting phase. And this can break out at any point during the late game when people start roaming their lanes to cause ganks as a larger number so that they can go ahead and clear objectives such as the Gold Fury, Fire Giant, and just clearing towers to win the match. And you want to stick close to your team so that you can have a numbers advantage and kill as many of the enemy team as you can so that you can push and win the match. If you did well in the laning phase and the rotating phase, you should be able to do well in this final phase of the match. If you did not do well, then you'll need to do some good tricks to turn things around and do well with your team and eventually win the match. 2v1. Now there are 3 reasons why you would end up in a 2v1 situation. The first reason is the enemy jungler is sticking with the soloist for a while before they start farming the jungle. The second reason is they're doing no jungler at all, so it's a 2-1-2 format. The final reason is their duo is fighting you at the solo, and your duo is fighting their soloist. And the solution you can do for that third one is you can ask your duo to come over and you switch lanes so that you can have solo on solo against duo and duo. But if they do not want to come over, then you're stuck in a pretty defensive situation where you're turtling at your tower and you try your best not to get poked or dive so you don't get killed. While you're at your tower, you need to do your best to kill minions because you get reduced XP when they get hit by the tower, and you get no gold if they get hit by the tower. So you want to do your best to finish off minions as best you can, and not let yourself get hurt too much. At the same time, you need to keep the enemy's attention and try to poke them so that your jungler, when they come over, will have an easier gank going on. Being able to gank this duo will cause a lot of good things for your team because they're already getting reduced XP and gold because they're sharing while you're getting singular. If you're not able to get these ganks though, you'll just be stuck in your tower for a lot of the match, and you just have to do the best you can until the team fighting phase happens, where you'll probably have to farm up more or just try your best to cause good situations for your team. There are some gods who can handle 2v1 very well. Most of them are the mid-clear gods, who are able to just clear the minions before they even get to the tower. And other gods are capable of handling that situation as well, but it will take time and experience to learn how to do it with each god, or if they can even do it at all. Final thought. Now the main priority for you, of course, is your solo lane, and then eventually when you get the rotation phase, it'll become the mid lane as well. but you want to always be ahead of the enemy soloist. As long as you're above them, you should be fine. Even if you're the lowest on your team, as long as there's someone below you on the other team, you're in good shape and you should do well when it gets to team fighting phase. An important thing to remember is that no lane is an island, and the jungle will be relying on you a bit to create ganks for them, and your mid will be relying on you to help them with their lane during the rotation phase for ganks or for pushing. So just remember that, and over time as you play this role, you'll get better at it and you'll understand what god works with your playstyle and what builds work well for you or for counter building and so on and so forth. And that'll be great. The more you learn, the better you'll do, and that is definitely a good thing. And that is the end of the solo guide. We now have completed the jungle guide and solo guide. Coming up will be the mid guide and eventually the duo guide, so that all roles will be covered. So if you learned some good stuff from this, you should check out those other guides as they come out or if they're already out, and see what you can learn from them, because not only can you learn how to play them, but also ways to counter them just from listening to these guides, because they will give you good ideas. Of course, these guides are meant for the basic to intermediate level, so if you've never done a role and you want to learn it, this should be helpful for that. For intermediate people, it might help you a little bit, but not as much, I'm sure. And then advanced people, I don't know if there's anything that'll be really helpful, but if there is, good for you. Now, if you know someone who's not really good at a role, they want to learn it, then definitely suggest these guides to them, because it will give them a good starting point, for sure. And that's what's important. The better everyone gets at this game, the better the game gets itself, because everyone's doing their roles very well and having a better understanding of how to play, and that's just great for everyone. So, that is the guide. I and Jinx had fun making it, hope you had fun learning from it, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? Having fun. Thanks for coming by, and see you next time.